We've told you many times that North Carolina is a birder's paradise, with more than 450 species of resident and migratory birds. Birds are far more than just creatures of beauty and grace. They are visible report cards of our stewardship of this place we call home. With the help of our friends from Audubon, North Carolina, here is our latest report from the birds. Throughout the year, we have the opportunity to see and photograph a world that many North Carolinians may not have time to experience. Here is a quick refresher of some of our favorite North Carolina birds. Along North Carolina's barrier islands and beaches, birds rule. You can often see hundreds of terns moving together on coastal beaches. If you're lucky, you will see magnificent black skimmers with their long beaks and black and white tuxedos. In the marsh, you will see a variety of wading birds, including the beautiful oyster catcher. In the forest next to the marsh, you'll be treated to the elegant long-beaked ibis. In the winter, these same marshes and wetlands will hold different birds, the birds of winter, migratory waterfowl from the north. As we move through the maritime forest in the springtime, from Cape Fear to Cape Lookout, we never get tired of the beauty and song of the painted bunting. No bird in the Carolinas can match this palette of colors. Some of our favorite travel each year is along coastal rivers, where we see a huge variety of resident and migratory birds, including the magnificent yellow-billed cuckoo, which winters from Central America all the way to Argentina. Along these rivers, we also learn who is the wisest. But the one bird we look forward to each year is the magnificent swamp canary, the prothonotary warbler. All of these birds are here for a reason: the right temperature and nesting conditions, the right plants to produce seeds, and the right Lepidoptera, moths and butterflies that produce caterpillars to produce hungry broods of avian youngsters. Biodiversity begets biodiversity. All of our native plants, birds, insects, mammals, and reptiles are part of intricate food webs that support each other. In many of North Carolina's Piedmont reservoirs and river bottoms, you are likely to see America's national bird, the bald eagle, and the avian garbage patrol, turkey vultures, and black vultures. Across the Piedmont and much of the state, you are also likely to see the bird Ben Franklin wanted as our national bird, the wild turkey. In the high mountains of western North Carolina, you'll find a large number of year-round resident birds and summer residents from Central and South America. Much of what we know about bird habitat and the movement of birds in North Carolina has come from a time-proven method which has helped us to unlock the secrets of the bird world: bird banding. To help us understand why we band birds and what we learned from them, Exploring North Carolina tagged along with an experienced group of bird banders working with North Carolina Audubon. In this group of all-star banders was Lindsay Addison from Audubon, McCoo Brown, John Weske, and John Gerwin, the research curator of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. We met these experienced scientists, birders, and a group of volunteers at the beginning of a 100-degree day near Carolina Beach State Park on the lower Cape Fear River. Even before the sun was high in the sky, we could feel the heat and humidity of our south coast. Lindsay Addison took us to several islands managed by Audubon, North Carolina. At our first stop, we saw pelicans in every stage of life, from egg to adult. If you ever doubted that birds are modern dinosaurs, then pay close attention to baby pelicans, which are dinosaur lookalikes. Lindsay Addison is a coastal biologist with Audubon, North Carolina, and a consummate professional. I asked Lindsay to tell me what bird banding can tell us about the lives of tar-heel birds.
So when we band birds, we're basically making a trade. We're going to inconvenience them for a few minutes and take them out of their normal routine in order to put the band on them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to gain information about where they go, how long they live, other demographic parameters. And that information then can be used to help make conservation decisions and preserve their species. So while we're inconveniencing the individuals that we're banding for a short period of time, we're using that inconvenience that we're putting the birds through to gain information that helps the entire species. So when you become a bird bander, you're taught that there's a code of ethics that goes with banding birds. And the most important two factors are the safety of the people that are banding the birds and the safety of the birds. So we're really very concerned about it being a positive, safe experience for people and also a positive, safe experience for birds.
I was surprised to learn from Lindsay how long certain species of coastal birds can live.
One of the things people are most surprised by is how long some of these birds live. For example, royal terns, which nest along the coast of North Carolina, can live to be over 30. In fact, the oldest known royal tern was 30 years and 10 months, and it was banded here in North Carolina as a chick. Other coastal birds have similarly long lifespans. Oystercatchers regularly live into their teens and even into their 20s.
Because birds aren't found just anywhere, they will be found in the environmental niche that suits their needs. I asked Lindsay how critical proper habitat is for some of our key coastal birds.
So if you think about all the things that pelicans need, water quality is the foundation of it all. If you don't have healthy marshes and productive ecosystems to produce the fish that they require, you're not going to have healthy populations of pelicans. One of the things that the pelicans need the most on these islands is a lack of disturbance. That's a lack of disturbance from people, because even though we don't mean any harm, we are much bigger than they are, so we look scary to them, and we will flush them off of their eggs or their chicks if we get too close. They also need to have a lack of disturbance from mammalian predators. Things like raccoons and foxes are really hard on ground nesting birds and birds that nest in low shrubs like the pelicans. So having islands that are free from predators and islands that are free from human disturbance is critical for the pelican's success.
With growing populations and reduced habitat, bird populations need the help of professionals. I asked Lindsay Addison to tell us about the work of Audubon in protecting important habitats in our coastal areas.
Audubon manages about 20 different islands, mainly in the southern portion of the state, for nesting water birds. And by manage, it means we take care of those islands, but those aren't necessarily sites that we own. We have sites that we lease, we have sites that we have agreements with the owners to manage for them, and we do have some sites that we have actually bought. So even though we don't own all of these islands, we have a responsibility to them for their management.
Virtually all of the conservation organizations with which we work succeed because of skilled volunteers. No volunteer has shown more dedication to North Carolina water birds than a Maryland resident, John Weske.
What brings me here is the richness that North Carolina has in colonial water birds. I did begin in Maryland and then worked down the Delmarva. And in the 70s, we went a little further south each year. We went to Hatteras in 1975, and then to the Cape Lookout Core Sound area in 1976, and then down here in 1977.
John Weske is a legend and a master bander. Having now passed his 8th decade, John has banded an astonishing number of birds.
Most people act as apprentices to a master bander. That's a bander who can band alone without supervision from somebody else. And once they get experienced, then they can apply to get a master permit issued by the Department of Interior. And then in the state of North Carolina, and in most other states, you would have to get a state permit as well. On my permit, upwards of $500,000, upwards of 500,000.
As Exploring North Carolina watched this dedicated group of volunteers band young pelicans, I asked John to explain the significance of bird bands and how the system works.
A bird band has a 9-digit number on it, and the best way of describing it is like a Social Security number that is issued to humans there. That number becomes unique to the bird. We put it on the leg, and that's the number for that bird, and we have to file records with the Department of Interior telling when and where that bird was banded and what it was.
Having visited the North Carolina coast often during most of my life, I can remember a time in the late 1960s and early 1970s when it was possible to go a whole day or a week and never see a pelican. In fact, in 1972, there were only 12 to 15 nesting pairs on the whole island of Ocracoke. Pelicans, osprey, eagles, and other birds were in peril because of a pesticide known as DDT. Although DDT was banned in this country in 1972, it took the work of countless volunteers and organizations like Audubon to bring back the magnificent pelican and these other iconic birds.
Audubon wouldn't be Audubon without our volunteers and our members. Volunteers help us do so much more work than our staff ever could do. Everything from helping us to post our nesting sites, band birds, educate the public, and also by having volunteers and citizen scientists working with these species, we show that it's not just a few scientists or a few crazy people that care about birds, it's a whole lot of people. North Carolina's coast is too big for any one organization to take care of all of our coastal birds. So 11 different organizations work together to manage coastal water birds all along our coast. That includes the state parks, the national parks, Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, the State Wildlife Resources Commission, and many others. And together, we all manage our sites, and by doing our part, we put together the pieces of the puzzle that adds up to bird conservation in the state.
Audubon, North Carolina is part of a national organization that looks at birds and their habitats across this state and beyond. After leaving the coast, we went to the mountains of northwestern North Carolina near the Tennessee border, where we met with Curtis Smalling and Kim Brand. Curtis is Director of Conservation for Audubon, North Carolina, and a nationally known expert on warblers. Kim Brand heads up Audubon's Bird Friendly Communities program. As with many birds on our coast, the birds in North Carolina's mountains often have specialized habitat requirements. Filming wild birds in their habitats for Exploring North Carolina is never easy. Even with an expert like Curtis Smalling, most of our success with tiny warblers came with still photography, utilizing 35mm cameras with long lenses. I asked Curtis to tell me about his favorite birds warblers.
You know, birds are a complicated creature, obviously, like most of our natural life out there. A lot of them are highly specialized. A lot of them have a broad variety of needs, I guess is the best way to put it. And I always like to use like a human example of that. So if you ask somebody that's looking for a new house what they want, they say open floor plan, good schools. Birds are kind of making that same kind of broad calculus decision to nest in an area. They need the right food if they're a specialist, for instance. So a warbler that we've been looking at today while we've been out in the field, they're mostly an insect eater and mostly a soft-bodied caterpillar eater. So they're going to look for places that support the species of prey that they can eat. We know that a lot of bird species, like those warblers or chickadees or cardinals in your yard, it takes us 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 of those caterpillars to raise a brood of chicks. That's a lot of food. So that's one of the big considerations. Are there enough of the right plants that support the right insects that provide the right amount of caterpillars and that kind of thing? But birds also need the right space or the right size yard, right? And so again, with working with some of the priority species that we work with, like golden-winged warbler or one of the tern species at the coast or whatever, they have kind of size requirements. I need this much habitat. For a golden-winged warbler, for instance, it might be 25 acres of habitat. And so they're looking for those places that fit that profile. They also don't like to be much below 3,000 feet in elevation. They've got this elevational limit, we would call it, like a lot of our bird species do. A lot of that is tied to things like temperature and the amount of moisture that's available. If we have a drought year, productivity goes down for a lot of these mountain species because they like a moist forest, a humid forest. We get a lot of morning fog and all that kind of stuff in the mountains, and a lot of birds depend on that level of moisture to keep, I think, probably the prey base and all that stuff going.
Curtis took exploring North Carolina to a part of the state with which many people are unfamiliar, a mountain area called the Amphibolites. I asked Curtis to explain this term, Amphibolites. For Audubon, North Carolina, this area is an important IBA, or an important bird area.
One of our biggest IBAs in Western North Carolina is the Amphibolites IBA. And people always ask us, what does that name mean? And so today we spend our day at Elk Knob State Park and surrounding areas, and that's in the Amphibolites. And Amphibolite is really the name of the rock that forms these mountains. There's a chain of high peaks in Ashe and Watauga counties that are largely formed from Amphibolite gneiss, a metamorphic rock. It creates more neutral soils. So whereas most of the Blue Ridge is fairly highly acidic soils, the Amphibolites have a more neutral soil. And the pH is not quite absolutely neutral, but it's usually in the 6s if you know your pH scale. So it's quite a bit sweeter. It's quite a bit less acidic than the rest of the mountains. And because of that, a few things show up right away. One is that as you look through the woods, there's not a lot of rhododendron. Rhododendron likes an acid soil type, and so a lot of the forest in the Amphibolites is northern hardwood forest, so it's yellow birch and beech and red oak and a number of species that would be familiar, but the understory is quite different. And when you get into early successional habitats and grassy, bald habitats, you get a really nice mix of plants. You get things that typically don't occur in some other areas, like Gray's lily is really common in the Amphibolites. It loves this kind of more neutral soil. We have a number of not quite as common in other parts of the state or other parts of the mountain, sedges, goldenrods. A lot of times a specific species within a genus that's fairly widespread across the mountains will just be found on these kind of more neutral soils. The 5th highest botanical inventory of any site in the eastern U.S. It's got close to 700 plant species that have been found in Long Hope Valley, and it's right in the middle of the Amphibolites.
I told you that Curtis is an expert on warblers. He has traveled throughout the Western Hemisphere, including Central and South America, to study these birds. I asked Curtis why it is important to know about bird habitats in other parts of the world and their effect on North Carolina.
Say we spend a lot of money making a lot of habitat, here at Elk Knob State Park or with private partners and the state agencies. what if we make a lot of habitat and birds never fill it? You know, there just aren't enough birds to fill that available habitat. By studying those birds in Nicaragua or Colombia or Venezuela where they're going, we start to learn, are there maybe some things going on there that reduce their overwinter survival? Maybe that's really what's driving population declines. And so we've done a lot of work, for instance, in Nicaragua for the last 6 or 8 years on golden wings. And just a couple of things that made us really want to look there is it's a really important place for golden wings. But in 1980, 80% of Nicaragua was forested. And in 2010, 22% of Nicaragua was forested. Those birds are still trying to winter there, and they're getting pushed into smaller and smaller fragments of forest within that country. So maybe some things are driving some population declines outside of what's happening here.
Kim Brand is the coordinator of bird-friendly communities across North Carolina. I asked Kim to describe some of the most important things that birds need to thrive.
So maintaining vegetated areas around our streams is incredibly important for many, many birds. It's important habitat for breeding. There are birds that specialize in that habitat and will only be able to live there if the width is big enough. So if there's 50 to 100 feet, more is better. You know, the more vegetated areas that aren't mowed along the stream, the better it's going to be for more birds. So they're also critically important for birds during migration as well. All birds are looking for water every day, and migratory birds especially so. And so often these buffers are some of the easiest places to just go out and look at birds. You know, you've got a greenway. Greenways are often next to streams in the mountains in Piedmont, and then if you've got a nice wide unmowed natural area along, you know, between that greenway and that creek, you're really going to have a chance at seeing a wide diversity of birds that are getting what they need from that habitat.
What do bird-friendly communities offer homeowners and landowners?
Bird-Friendly Communities is our program that focuses on helping birds thrive right alongside people in cities and towns. So it's empowering people to help birds in those places that are dominated by humans and buildings and roads and things like that. So something anyone across North Carolina could do today to help birds out in really meaningful ways is to plant more native plants in your yard, whether that means digging up grass, which is a great way to do it, replacing that with native plants, whether it means, you know, adding some native perennials like coneflower, goldenrod, beautiful asters that bloom in the fall, adding those into your garden beds that you already have. That way you can offer up more food resources for the birds as they're either passing through or they're hanging around in your yard year-round.
Whether you live on the coast, in the Piedmont, or on our highest peaks, you've probably asked the why question. Why should we spend so much time and energy protecting buffers, planting food, and preserving habitats for birds and other small creatures that we may only see a few times each year? Curtis Smalling had some thoughts.
Birds are the wildlife that everybody sees and that everybody notices. Birds experience the world the same way that we do. Their two primary senses are sight and hearing. And so when they communicate with each other, we pick up on that. So a bird is out there singing to attract a mate or tell its neighbor it's there. But to a person, we hear it because we use those senses primarily. We can't diminish the importance of that, the role that birds play in kind of engaging people into the natural world, so that we can hopefully, and this is kind of Audubon's, mantra, is we want to bring those people into the advocacy work, the citizen science. I think birds are a great ambassador for that.
We hope you know by now that maintaining our magnificent and diverse bird populations requires more than a few birdhouses and bird feeders. It requires the work of conservation professionals and people like you in bird-friendly communities. And we learned this while exploring North Carolina.